This is Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast examining different aspects of sound and image-based cultural production and their broader contexts and potential impacts. I'm the host and creator, Paula Blair. This week, Andrew, Shail and I have a post-screening discussion of the Miseducation of Cameron Post and issues around religious, gay, conversion therapies and women in marginalised groups working in the film industry. If you would like to be part of the conversation, I'll be back at the end with contact details and ways you can support the podcast and building up the website. For now, enjoy the discussion.
So, Dr. Blair,
Yeah.
apparently you shall not lie with a male as with a woman, it is an abomination.
If you're a man.
Yeah.
And what about women? What should they do?
They should be lain with.
They should
That
just
seems
be
to
lain
be the
with by
implication.
men.
Yeah.
That's about it, really.
There's all this stuff about whether if you're raped outside of town, you don't get put to death, but if you're raped inside of town, you do. But nothing specifically about same-sex attraction with the ladies. So what have we just watched?
We're just out of seeing The Miseducation of Cameron Post. I've had quite an emotional time watching it. It's such a well-made film, beautifully made, really solidly written. It really packs a punch. I thought it's got quite a lot of joy in it amid quite difficult things going on. I feel like I'm probably not clear enough to really do it justice at the moment, but we'll see how we get on. I think before we went to see it, I was feeling like it might be a bit more of a serious version of But I'm a Cheerleader, which is a film that came out in 1999. And The Miseducation of Cameron Post was made in the past couple of years, released in 2018, but set in 1993. So there's a lot of political stuff going on that we'll need to get into later, around the Clintons. Just before we get into this, I think But I'm a Cheerleader is really worth watching. It's directed by Jamie Babbitt. It's more of a comedy where the main character Megan is 17. She's the lead cheerleader. She goes to prom. She has a boyfriend. She's the perfect blonde, beautiful, the ideal homecoming queen, or she's supposed to be. That's what everybody's trying to build her up to be. But her parents suspect that she's a lesbian, and she's never really thought about this before. She has a boyfriend. She's a cheerleader. She's done all the right things, in scare quotes, but her parents just suspect that she's not quite girly enough, that she's performing all these things, so they send her to a camp. I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since I've seen it, and I read up again about it. It seems to be more a psychological thing. I can't remember if it was religious or not, so we might need to check that. But she gets sent to a camp that's similar to the kind of camp that Cameron gets sent to get the gay out of her, and that's when she realises she actually is gay, and she falls in love with one of the other girls who's there.
We often in these situations go, let's find out if the director or the screenwriter or the producer had seen this earlier film. But you can have remakes of earlier films because what happens is a situation where the two films are like cousins rather than the one is a parent of the other.
Yes, I
They're
think
both
so, yeah.
a telling of a mythos that's kind of bumping around anyway, which is, and the idea here seems to be, if you set up a gay conversion camp, you're automatically going to fail because what you're doing is you're getting a lot of same-sex attractive people
together
and putting them into same-sex environments.
and dorms that they share.
And they're all sharing rooms. And they put in a regime of nighttime inspections, which involves shining a torch in your face while you sleep, but that, of course, can't practically extend to 24-hour surveillance, and so, of course, they end up bonding over being gay and living together.
I think it's a sign of the times, probably, is that was quite lightly done in But I'm a Cheerleader.
Yeah.
And it was sort of just, a quite light way of saying some people are different. And it's a really fun film, and it's really worth watching. And I think there is, Clea Duvall is in it. She's the person that Megan falls for. Meg is played by Natasha Lyonne. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Clea Duvall is the one she falls for, and they get together and stuff. She is quite a powerful performance and has come from a very different background, I think, from Megan. So there's that kind of issue, but it's mostly a comedy.
Right.
It's mostly quite a light teen romance comedy, and it's about the absurdity of the situation. Whereas with The Miseducation of Cameron Post, it's heavy going. Cameron Post, one of the main differences is that she has fallen for, love doesn't really come into it, because you know what it is, they're teenagers and their hormones are going nuts, and all they can think about is sex. So she and her best friend start having this sexual relationship, and they both have boyfriends and they have to go to prom with them, but they don't really seem to, you don't get the impression in the scenes where they're together that there's anything odd about what they do. They don't seem to really discuss it. It's just happening and it's consensual and they're enjoying it, and they take any opportunity they can to explore each other, express how they feel, and they don't really seem to think of themselves as gay. They don't really seem to have got to a place where they're exploring what that means. They're just enjoying being together and it feels very natural. But then of course they're discovered and they're made to feel unnatural, and there's quite a big fallout from that. Cameron gets sent to God's Promise camp by her aunt. She's been brought up by her aunt because her parents died when she was young. The family's very religious. I mean, her best friend is somebody that she goes to Bible camp with. There are already big differences there where there's this overarching religious connotation, and I think one of the main points that the film is making is that the people running the camp have all the best intentions. They really believe that they're helping people, and I think that's the scariest bit. And it comes up actually in the film, and I wasn't expecting it to do this, but one of the parts of it, it's going along fairly happily, and then Cameron's trying to just do it and get through it, but then one of the other inmates, one of the other disciples as they call them, but really they're inmates, most of them are there without choice, sent by family and not allowed to leave. And Mark, he thought he was doing really well, but his father has rejected him. He says, "You're still too feminine, I can't have that in my house." He has a breakdown. He tries to castrate himself.
Well, it's
not clear because they talk around it.
He cuts his penis, but I thought there's possibilities. Like, one of them is possible castration. Another one might be that he just wants that thing to not be doing things that he doesn't have any control over, and pours bleach on it.
So it's unusable basically as a sexual organ. It's incredibly well done how they play it out. It's actually more through how the other disciples, how it affects them and the different ways that they react to this. You don't really see much about him. This happens and it's the fallout on them.
It's the precipitating event, isn't it, that breaks the equilibrium that's just about achieved during the middle portion of the film. This event occurs when suddenly there's a violent event. It's made clear that this emotional abuse is causing these teenagers to hate themselves, and that overflowing into violence means that the obedience of the inmates starts to disintegrate.
Breaks down.
And I mean, even before he does it, actually, there's that moment where they're doing a kind of group therapy session, and Mark is shouting this recited Bible verse, which highlights a contradiction in Christianity. Just the way, and it's not a contradiction. It's actually a contradiction in several different ways. And one of them is that it just says black is white, because it says when I am weak, I am strong. It's just a way of saying A can also be not A at the same time. So he's shouting this Bible verse, and he's face down on the ground, showing how strong he is by doing press-ups. And then, what's her name? Lydia, the therapist who's in charge of all this stuff, stands next to him with one foot on his back and says, "I'll remove my foot when you calm down." And that's the action of a slave owner, isn't it? And other slave owner actions that she carries out include shaving Adam's head.
Adam's long hair, his gorgeous long hair. He's reciting that particular verse because his father says that what he has is a weakness, and he's saying, "My weakness is my strength." It's quite a powerful scene, and there's quite a lot of cross-cutting back and forth in time between the group therapy session playing out and Cameron waking up having heard noises, commotion and the car going off, and her going to see what was going on and discovering the blood all over the bathroom.
I've been alone in my house for the past 10 days, as you may have heard.
10?
10? Well,
so I've gone for a week.
Oh, okay, alright.
A week, Thursday to Thursday, it's not 10 days.
Are you revealing to our listeners that we live together?
I thought that was obvious.
Okay, so you've been gallivanting for a week.
During that time, medically needed to be in Spain for a week.
During that time, when you're alone in a house, any noise at night...
Oh my goodness.
Will make you start thinking, what's happened? And when you wake up and you've just heard a big noise, there is this impulse to go and check everything, because the big noise you just heard might have been the 8th noise in a row out of a big load of noises and things happening. And particularly as there was this thing happened last year where some people baseball batted the house across the road. And of course, it was only after about 10 seconds of that I woke up. I definitely empathised with Cameron at that moment. I thought, you have to get up, but that noise that you just heard that just woke you up, that was the last noise in quite a large set of noises of something very bad happening. So yeah, the disintegration moment is when it becomes apparent that it's not harmless. Before it becomes apparent that it's not harmless, the kids do seem to be just rolling with it.
Yeah.
They're just, teenagers, they seem to be rolling with it. They're just going, well, this is what parents do to us, this is what adults, this is what the parent culture does to us. We can find moments of fun in it anyway. We're not being physically abused, we're eating well, and we can have a laugh in between us. And we do occasionally get to do things like karaoke and going out to musical concerts where we can have the enjoyment of listening to music and losing yourself in rhythm. And some of them do even seem to benefit from group therapy. So there's lots of, okay, it's fine. But then that moment where suddenly they can't ignore anymore that this is actually abusive. It came late in the film. It was that moment that was going almost inevitably to come at some point.
But that's how it works, because it's a slow dripping tap. You know, it's just this slow chipping away at something, and then there's this tipping point where, no, that actually this is unacceptable, this is abuse, I'm calling it out. An investigator has to come after Mark has hurt himself and has been hurt by this system that he's in. And really it's his parents, it's his father that's done that. It's the school's trying to do what his father wants and it's still not good enough, so that's why this boy's done this.
A comparison with But I'm a Cheerleader may be illuminating, because this film doesn't have characters read out the relevant Bible verses.
No.
It doesn't have characters praying all the time, but what it does do is make it clear that this is a religious camp and that they do have a particular Christian justification for doing this, because they mention it. They say that the thing to identify as here is a Christian. Don't think of yourself as homosexual or heterosexual. You need to be thinking of yourself as a Christian. You count. And there's discussions that several characters have about belief. And there's even a really revealing discussion where Mark just says to Cameron, do you believe in God? And she goes, I think I might be faking it.
Yeah, I'm
Something
not really
vaguely
sure.
to that effect.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of making this up. No, I'm not really supposed to think this, but I don't think I do. There's allusions to the religious basis of all this.
I think it's specifically Baptist as well, because it's quite happy clappy and singing and everybody's lovely and friendly and that sort of thing.
Right.
And very New Testament-y, you know,
It's not okay if you're a Methodist, for example.
Yes,
is it?
exactly. Yeah, like Methodism's very pared back.
Yeah.
You don't have the sort of gospel, or you wouldn't be allowed really the rock concerts or anything, but they're going to Christian rock concerts, they're listening to Christian rock. And Cameron's not allowed to listen to the Breeders, amazing bands, but she's not allowed to listen to them. I actually want to look into the band that was in the film. I wrote them down. They came up as Wild Yop.
I thought either they've got a Christian song and they've got another band to play it, or they've just got a Christian band to play it, but there isn't a Christian band who would be at all okay with gay conversion therapy.
I wanted to look into this because I knew all this sort of thing 15 years ago, but I have not remembered any of my musical knowledge at all. But I was wondering if there was any connection with the Breeders, with anybody that was in this band.
Well, the basic principle of Christian culture in the sense of bands, writers of fiction, people producing any cultural works that seek to identify themselves as Christian, is take an existing thing and do the Christian version of it.
There might be a fictional band made up for the thing as well, but they were all named individually, but I didn't manage to write them down.
They do seem to be a band. They have a website called wildyawp.com. Wild, adjective meaning uncontrolled or unrestrained, expressing pursuit of pleasure. Yawp, noun, a raucous noise, a cry, a shout. Activism.
We support Open Borders.
I think that they might not be a member of Christian culture.
This is from their website. We support Open Borders. We support the rights of people of colour, queer and trans people, Muslims, people with disabilities, and anyone else whose fundamental rights are under attack. We support a woman's right to choose. We support public education and equal access to affordable healthcare. We support an end to mass incarceration. We support freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and net neutrality. We believe in science and affirm that climate change is real.
But, you can still believe all that and still call yourself Christian, so just going to have a wee chat. So yeah, the band is pretending... Well, actually, no.
They're democratic at the very least, if we're talking in American politics terms.
Capital D, democratic.
Capital D, democratic.
If they are playing in the film a Christian band, they're playing a Christian band that has ideas that are very different from their own ideas. The reason I mention the comparison with But I'm a Cheerleader is that there's an option when you do films like this of going, the religious basis of all of this, that's a bit of an embarrassment, we're never going to touch it. But what seems to have been done in Miseducation of Cameron Post is kind of a halfway position where they chart a process which where the religious stuff is kind of a minority, and where most of it is talking cure, one-on-one therapy, group therapy, art therapy as well. They show this process which draws on non-religious ideas about consciousness works, but they nonetheless made sure that the fact that this is a Christian thing can't be ignored. I did find myself going, we'd been listening to Chloe Grace Moritz, who plays Cameron, but listening to her saying that this is not a criticism of Christianity at all, that it's a criticism of a misrepresentation or misinterpretation of Christian doctrine. And I'm thinking, okay, she kind of has to say that. She can't go, you know what, I'm wholeheartedly endorsing this film, which is completely criticising Christianity. But there were moments there where I thought, this film is just very quietly going, Christianity is both nonsense and harmful. And one moment where it did that is that moment when Mark says to Cameron, so do you have those moments where you feel like you're pretending to talk to God? And she says yes. And he goes, those are the moments where you really need to lean back on your faith. And she goes, don't think I have any faith to lean back on. So there's a particular discussion in that one scene at least of how the idea of faith is a part of a mechanism of control, and one that these two teenagers can see straight through. And another area where I thought this is specifically actually criticising the religion concerned here is that Pastor Rick and his sister, it's Lydia, isn't it, who's the therapist, they're pretending to really understand the psychology of same-sex attraction. And so they have a pseudo-psychoanalytic approach to how they're going to get everyone to not feel that attraction anymore. So they have this pretending to understand the mechanism that's causing what they deem to be a problem. And that pretending to understand, of course, turns out to be just a fiction. And that in itself alludes to the idea that the entire religion may just be this pretending to understand. So on several different... Oh, and there was one other moment when they were in that bookstore, and of course when you go into a real environment to shoot a scene, you can't just leave the real environment completely as you found it. So maybe it was a coincidence, but I think that almost certainly somebody went in and went, okay, we're turning that book around so you can see the front of it. They were standing at a bank of books, and on the top bookshelf there was a book that was called, I wrote down most of its title, it was called Cults, Faith, Healing and something. I didn't get the name of the author, but there's this big thing that said cult. That book had been deliberately turned, I think, so that it was facing forward. So that during this bookshop scene, when the characters were talking, there was this book that was sitting there going, you're like a cult, and that's a bad thing. Subtly, this movie was, I think, criticising Christianity and not just the use of gay conversion therapy. Now, while we're on the particular nature of the therapy, it might seem like what they were trying to do was go, it's kind of okay, it's abused by some people, but it's kind of okay because it's just about talking. Well, the talking cure version is actually quite recent. The earlier versions of gay conversion therapy, and I've learned this courtesy of Seth Andrews' Thinking Atheist podcast, where he's interviewed some people who've been through it. The earlier version was electroconvulsive therapy, and so it gradually shaded into something which was a little bit more humane. But of course, as Cameron specifically says, it's emotional abuse. There's a decision made in writing this screenplay to go, we could just show a practice which was still around at the time, which was putting people into aversion therapy. And aversion therapy, it is used now, even at the hands of the NHS, to try and get people to, for example, not smoke anymore. If you can get somebody to associate smoking with a feeling of nausea, they won't smoke. Okay? So if somebody really consents to it, in that sense, it can still be done. But aversion therapy with sexuality, of course, we'd be aware that if somebody consented to doing that, you can only really get them to consent to do it by
convincing them that they are evil.
And so doing, take the choice away from them.
Yeah, exactly. They are brainwashing them.
There's that one moment where I found myself going, wow, are they actually going to kind of celebrate a moment here where she gets with the program, she stops the initial resistance and she really becomes part of it? And they, for just a moment, they showed Cameron, for a couple of scenes, they did a kind of montage with some music over the background. They showed Cameron seemingly becoming more integrated into this culture where everyone keeps stating that their same-sex attraction is a result of problems with their upbringing. It seemed, okay, right, so maybe this film's going to go that way, but of course it went a couple of steps in that direction to go, just look at how powerful this situation is. And it's powerful for several reasons. They have a sense of community, they have a sense that other people are taking responsibility for how they think, and they have something promising to remove them from social conflict, even though the social conflict is caused by the system that's claiming to cure them, and thereby remove them from that conflict. I've been very good at not talking about shot duration and lens length.
Well, we need to, because the camera was, how did I put it? It was unflinching, I put it. but it wasn't intrusive. I noticed it was a lot of zoom, so it was quite tight on people's faces, but it was using the zoom, so the camera wasn't right up in the actors' faces when they were doing things. So it felt like it was distance. You're close, but there's distance. That's what it felt like to me.
In the sex scenes that we saw early on, and there was the one that we saw as it was happening, and then another one that we saw in flashback. The first one is the one that happens in the car between Cameron and, is it Coley?
Coley,
C-O-L-E-Y? I had never come across that name before. Okay, so the sex scene between Cameron and Coley, that is shot in very tight close-ups with really shallow focus. And then a later one, which Cameron is recalling again between her and Coley, that's one where they seem to be in somebody's bedroom back at someone's house before she became an inmate, stroke disciple. Again, shot in very shallow focus and shot very close up. But then later on in the film, the way that the camera seemed to behave, it seemed to go, you know what, I don't think I really care about what you do in the privacy of your own bedrooms anymore, so I'm going to do lots of standing back and watching without popping around from one shot to the next, from one camera setup to the next, even when it seems like it's time for the shot to end. Later on in the film, those extreme close-ups or close-ups, shallow focus shots, those very brief shots, that was all gone. Then the camera had become a lot less interested in what was happening in Cameron's pants. And I think that might have been very implicitly the film going, maybe we should just care a little bit less than we currently do about sexuality.
I find that the camera it wasn't necessarily static, it felt like it was perhaps handheld with a lot of the shots, but it was maybe the camera operator was in the one place and the DP was Ashley Connor, and actually it's a very woman heavy crew, so it seems like she's held the camera in roughly the same, but following the action, so there's slight movements left and right following the actors and taking their lead, but it's never intrusive, it's never about seeing the bodies, it's never about seeing thrusting movements, it's just this is the natural flow of what's happening right now. This is teenagers getting off, not intruding on their private space, but it's giving us enough. We need to see it because we need to understand their experiences, and actually it normalises it. That's what happens. They're just normalising stuff, and they don't strip everything off. Things happen in the heat of the moment. Passions rise, it's the backs of cars, it's single beds, it's very teenagery, you know, it's very normal. It's never intrusive, and it's a lot of it's in what you maybe call a mid-shot, and you might be able to see an actor's whole body because they're bent up, you know, they're crumpled up, they're sitting on a bed, for example, but it's happening, it's really hard to explain, but there's distance and yet there's closeness at the same time. It's just as closeness, but it's not intrusive, and it's not trying to ogle them. It's not for our pleasure. They're having pleasure, and we just happen to be witnessing it.
I think the scene in which Cameron wakes up from an erotic dream, and it's at the God's Promised camp. She wakes up in the middle of the night, and her roommate Erin is leaning over her and saying, "Are you okay? You okay? You seem to be having a dream." And Cameron goes, "Yeah, I'm fine, okay." And then, because they're so physically close, they both just give in to the fact that they are sex-starved lesbian teenagers and kiss each other.
It seems like Erin goes for Cameron.
Yeah.
And Cameron just responds because she wants to have sex. Yeah. That's how I got it. And it actually comes up in the conversation afterwards that Cameron doesn't feel that way towards Erin.
And then the film did a great job of going, it's not that all gay people want to have sex with all other gay people.
No.
However, if you add in that this particular gay person is a teenager and is being told that they must not do this thing and prevented from even masturbating, they are going to be quite horny.
Yes.
And so will quite happily have a bit of sex with a person
just
who
about
they're
anything.
not particularly interested in. So anyway, during that scene, that camera, it just sat there in a single shot without moving, and I think, you know, you have to do that thing where you go, okay, people are lying down, so you have to imagine someone standing up to estimate what we call the camera distance, so that I think it would count as a medium to medium close-up.
Yeah.
And it just had them do something that was all very teenage. It was lots of fumbling under bedclothes.
It is, and it's fumbling under clothes and things. Nobody's stripping off all the time.
The sum total of people's bodies that we saw in this film was one boob from the side. So it got the teenage aspect of what the people are doing bang on.
Yeah, absolutely.
While it remains in my mind, the Clinton bit.
Yes, there's quite a lot here actually. By the Clinton bit, do you mean the sign on the car? So at the end, Cameron and the friends that she's made, she's found her people, she's found Adam, and she's found Jane Fonda.
Whose parents shouldn't have called her Jane.
They've called her Jane Fonda because, well, they're hippies, and she's born in a commune. She probably doesn't know who her father is because her mother was. The little bit that you see, Tiny Jane, in. The little flashback to tiny Jane was her mum with two guys at the same time at a commune, and little tiny Jane rolling joints. And then Jane is a character who, she's got a prosthetic leg because, well, she says that she was in a bad car accident at one point, so she's got this prosthetic leg. The actor isn't disabled, it's more a plot point, I think, because it's where she stashes stuff. She grows weed out in the woods because they're allowed to go for hikes.
Yeah.
She grows weed out in the woods, but they manage to smuggle treats for themselves, so just like pop that they're not allowed to have, and the crisps, just treat things that they're not allowed to have in the school, and she smuggles them in her leg. But I noticed with that, because Sasha Lane, who plays her, is a person of colour, and the leg is for more of a Caucasian type skin.
Oh, yes.
So,
yeah.
you know, there's that kind of normalisation that the default human is white, as well as heterosexual.
It's why I think all plasters should be blue, so that we can never have anyone claiming that there's such a thing as a skin-coloured plaster.
Yeah, or like purple or pink.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Spider-Man, come on, that's what you want on your
Spider-Man
plaster.
plasters to feel like a hero. And I think there's a nice connection there. So they end up on the road, they do manage to escape, and they just do it very calmly. They have a small encounter with Rick, the guy who's teaching, and Rick, it has to be said, he's very important because he himself has been through this conversion therapy. There's a discussion that his sister, who is the therapist at the school, he was her guinea pig. He's a gay man, and they've forced him to not be gay anymore, and they've made him normal, scare quotes.
We need a radio noise for scare quotes.
Yeah, to make it clear that I don't mean what I'm saying. And poor Rick, he's pretty traumatised after what's happened with Mark. He's going through a lot of stuff, but he's trying to suppress it because he needs to maintain his normality now. And so he's trying to do that, and they're having a very early breakfast because they're getting ready to hike through the woods and shed their lives at this place.
Yeah.
And they don't know what they're going to, but they're going. So there's this very interesting scene, and again, the camera sits back from the table and just observes, and it all plays out in one shot. It's a prolonged shot because when the three of them get up and leave to head off, it continues to observe Rick just sitting there eating cereal.
That was my favourite shot in the whole film.
Yeah, it was
because
powerful.
it just kept watching and
relentless.
kept watching and kept watching. And you'd think, oh, hang on, this is Pastor Rick. He's the pastor of this place. He's not the therapist, but he's one of the two people who are managing it and are telling people that it's wrong for them to even think of themselves as gay, because no one's gay because it's a sin. But this is somebody who's clearly himself been a victim of gay conversion therapy.
Yeah.
And just in case no one's aware of this, gay conversion therapy doesn't work. People, after a while of, when they walk out the door, after a while of having lots of emotional conflict, just go, I think I'm gay. That's generally what happens. And so this is somebody who himself has just created a mental conflict and who has had recent challenges to the brainwashing he's been through, who has no more authority anymore. The teenagers have realised with Mark having hurt himself that the people who are supposed to be caring for them are not actually caring for them. So he's just this vulnerable character just sitting there eating cereal, just letting three of the teenagers under his charge walk out the door without suspecting that the reason that they're all up really early in the morning and that they've got rucksacks is that they're leaving permanently. It's a slightly redeeming moment for one of the two people running this camp, but of course it's a redeeming moment for him and not for Lydia, because he's the one who's also a victim. He's just an older victim than they are. So that was a very sweet moment. I can't help but think that shot was supposed to end earlier, but that he just kept eating cereal and the DP just kept running.
I don't know though, I would say they were probably told by Desiree Akharan to push it for as long as you can. It wouldn't surprise me because there's a lot of pathos in it. I thought you can see him thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
He's got this moment of solitude, but he's still performing that version of Rick. So he's done the whole, oh wow, you're all keen hikers, I'm so impressed, you know, and he's doing the whole Pastor Rick spiel.
Which is basically just be human to people.
It's be human, be super friendly and impressed by just little things that they do. He's enthusiastic, he's encouraging about their interests. There's a really nice part where he has a little conversation with Cameron and she said, do you watch any movies lately? said, oh, in your recommendation I watched Young Frankenstein finally. That's the most I've laughed in years, and they do the elbow kiss. And it's really, really sweet because they've made this little connection. He is one of them more than he's anybody else. And she's a really lovely person, and she's a very caring person, and so is he, actually. He means very well, and as you say, he's abused by this too. It shows you that he's human, he takes joy in things. And this is the same person who, when we first meet him, he's going through her bags.
Which is proper sinister.
Stuff. It's really sinister, and he's the one, I think, who's checking them with the flashlight every night as well.
Yeah.
So it's quite sinister. There's a lot of surveillance, and he is the one enacting that surveillance. He's surveilling them all the time. But then you get this very sweet moment at the end where you see this is just a guy, and he is suffering as much as they are.
And he's completely out of his depth.
Yeah,
and
he doesn't know what he's doing.
That moment where he's trying to do one-on-one therapy with Cameron after Mark's hurt himself, and Cameron goes, "You're just making this up as you go along, aren't you?" And he starts crying. That's a really important moment in the film, I think, to show that it's not the people who are dominating them are evil. The people who are dominating them are themselves either mistaken or victims. And so we have Rick himself being a victim, and then Lydia does seem to be quite sadistic. This is somebody who has clear social reasons for why she's made the mistake that she has.
But again, it's like, how far back does the victimhood go? Because when there's that part where Mark is on the floor, and after she's removed her foot, he crumples on the floor and he's crying. She's on the floor with him and she's comforting him. This is someone who believes that she's doing this out of kindness, that she's trying to help him, and that he's going to get over this. This is just a setback for him, and she's going to help get him better. She really believes that she's going to do that.
A lot of the talking cure stuff that they do, it's about discussing how these kids feel about their parents, and that can help.
It's quite Freudian in a way.
This is the insidious part of it, is that it's clearly indicated to be a biblical thing, but there's all this Freudian stuff added on top of it as a way of giving it this patina of legitimacy as an actual means to help people psychologically. You can go, okay, we've had a breakthrough today because you've cried out your resentment about the way that your dad dominates your mum, for example, and then you can pretend that it was the Christianity that helped, whereas it was just the listening that helped. It was just the asking of some questions, So the way that was scripted was a great way of indicating that this stuff takes purchase, it takes hold on the people who it's done to, because it has mechanisms for appearing to be understanding and appearing to make a difference.
Well, we were trying to get back to the end of the film. The Clinton stuff's in a very roundabout way. Well, when the kids escape, they have a little ritual burning of their icebergs. They have this diagram that they have to fill in. You can only see the tip of the iceberg. You can't see the 9/10 underneath. The stuff that's suppressed inside, so that's why they're doing this talking therapy. It's
another one of those examples of appearing to understand the causality behind things. So they go, hey, here's tip of the iceberg. Tip of the iceberg is same-sex attraction. What's underneath the surface is the things that have caused your same-sex attraction. So it must be something to do with Cameron, it's the fact that she's an orphan, for example.
She's an orphan and she's really into sport. She's a runner. She's a track runner. And sport comes up quite a lot with the girls, especially. So Erin, her roommate, is really into... Is it football she's really into?
Oh, American football, yes.
Yeah.
We must call it American football for our non-US listeners.
She's really into American football, and she's the one doing the
Bless her size,
which apparently is a real thing. And
Bless her size with Tandy Campbell,
whose name has been changed for legal purposes, and apparently this is a real person. It's like the reinforcing of gender stereotypes that women aren't allowed to be in sports. They're allowed to go hiking because apparently that's a neutral sport. Everybody's allowed to walk.
This is gender politics being very neatly noticed in this film. This claim that somehow there's some sort of biblical mandate for having category A, which is male sports, category B, which is female sports, and category C, which is gender neutral sports. And that where category B, apparently, it seems, includes aerobics. So they burn the icebergs. And I did at that moment go, they've been involved in these rituals over the course of their time at this camp, and this is them creating their own ritual. It's a way of showing you don't need to rely on an institution like this for ritual. Just invent your own. So they burn the iceberg drawings, and
they manage to get out to the road, and then we see them later in the day because there's a very clear light change. They leave in the morning, and when we see them again, it cuts to them in the evening in the back of a pickup truck. And on the back window of the pickup truck is a Clinton Gore sticker because it's 1993 and the 1994 election is coming up. Or is it 90? Oh, I'm getting mixed up now. No, it was...
Let's consult the internet. It's left over from the 1992 1992 United States presidential
Oh, that's
election.
what it. Okay, yeah. So that makes
Which
sense.
was held in November 1992, so of course
That makes sense.
our man Clinton only took over from Bush early in 1993.
That makes a lot of sense then, that it would be an old sticker.
Yeah.
It's a very clear statement of quite a few things. So the person who's picked them up is a Democrat. So they're safe against scare quotes. So they're safe for this person.
I did find myself thinking, if they're going to hitchhike, how are they going to know who's a safe person to pick them up? Is it going to be plates, because they got state-specific plates in the US? They're going to have to wait for a California state thing to come by. But then, of course, a Clinton Gore sticker will do.
But then it's on the back. But that's more our information than for them. It's the Clinton Gore sticker that you see behind them. Interestingly, when the film was in production, it was before the 2016 election. A lot of the cast and crew were campaigning for Hillary Clinton in that election. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. In the interview that Chloe Grace Moretz did with Simon Mayo, she explains that they were in the middle of filming, so they were having quite early nights, and she said they had a bit of a party that night. They went to bed believing that they were going to wake up to Hillary Clinton being the next president because she had the most votes. But then, of course, the news comes the next day that all the states were turning red, going to Trump.
Because the electoral college system makes sense.
It's really fascinating then to have the film end that way with the Clinton Gore sticker and the reality that there is today. And actually, this is 25 years later. Right now, we're in 2018. The film set 25 years ago. They're still fighting this. So she, in the interview, was saying the film itself became political activism to make it and put it out during his administration. Not really because of Trump, but more because of Mike Pence, his vice president. So that's, I think, why it's even more important that it's the Trump Gore sticker, because this is Trump-Pence administration that they're under. And Mike Pence is a huge advocate for these Christian gay conversion camps. Simon Mayo made the point that those sorts of things, the therapy at least, has been made legal in the UK. It seems to be increasing in the US.
But at a national level, it's not illegal. It's only illegal in some states to do it with minors. The United States of America, fantastic in several ways, including church-state separation, but not in others, it seems, including encroachments on church-state separation.
So I think that politics there's something very interesting to go into, and also the fact that the film has a very woman-heavy crew, and that it's a queer film. That in itself, again, they were making it before, this didn't come up in the interview, but they were making this before the Weinstein stuff broke, when a lot of the campaigns about just women in film very generally were getting a lot of steam. So this is quite ahead of the curve. Desiree Akharan, she's Iranian American. So I was thinking about Sacha Lane as well, because it's quite a mixed cast, and Sacha Lane was, I need to check this, but I'm pretty sure this is right, that she was the lead person in Andrea Arnold's American Honey. So again, another woman film director. She found Sacha Lane on a beach during spring break.
Nice.
So this is somebody who wasn't a professional actor, who had no aspirations of being an actor, who's now become a really good actor in her own right, doing this kind of film with a star like Chloe Grace Moretz, who seems to be a very intelligent young woman, very passionate about these things. She's been very passionate about this issue because two of her brothers are gay and have been through this gay conversion, because she explains in the interview, I'll link it in the extended show notes, they actually consulted with their church. She grew up in a very religious family, and they actually consulted their church, and they were terrified about coming out to their parents. It's such an upsetting thing. These young people who can't be themselves, who can't explore who they are. So that ending with the three of them, with Adam and Jane and Cameron on the back of the pickup truck, the American road is the ultimate symbol of freedom.
Yeah.
But it's one of those prolonged shots on them. So they're moving, but the camera's not moving, but they're moving because they're on the back of the pickup truck. There's this movement there's something static about it at the same time. It's quite close on the three of them, and it's shallow focus, so you can't see America going past them. They could be crossing the border, we don't know. They've talked about that a bit earlier when they were planning their escape.
Specifically talking about going to Canada, as if they regard America as having no places where it's okay to be gay in it.
Or they might be just near enough the border that they might be safe there. It's hard to know exactly what the reasoning is there, but it seems like Canada might be a more liberal place than at least the state that they're in.
It's the nearest liberal place.
Yeah, exactly. And American Honey, it's essentially a road movie in many ways. I haven't seen it, but I've heard a lot about it, I've read a lot about it, and it's very much a road movie in some ways. And then to have it end like that, I think with the American road movie specifically, it's about the freedom, but also the constrictions that can come with freedom, the uncertainty, the scariness of freedom. These are young people, they're only 16, 17. What can they really do? They have no money, they have nowhere to go. You've got this prolonged shot where they're sort of riding into the sunset, happy ending, but I suppose it's a bit like The Graduate, in a way, like the back of the bus. Oh, this has been really exciting and we're running off together and isn't this great? But the shot is held and their faces start to drop.
At the very least, that transition that we get in the very last shot of The Graduate, well, it's not the last shot, the penultimate shot yet. That transition we get from they're really, really happy to, what have we done? At least we don't get something as drastic.
You don't get that,
at the end of this.
No, they're quite enjoying it actually, because they're living in the moment. They're teenagers. They're just saying, well, we're going to be fine this time. They're resourceful people as well. Something will happen and they'll be okay. You get that sense, but there is just that overhanging fear and uncertainty that what they're going to might not be any better. There is something quite worrying there. But I just thought that was worth mentioning. A lot of the music that they listen to that's considered to be subversive. So like you've got the visual of the cassette tape of the Breeders a couple of times in the film, because that's also what Cameron tries to shoplift from the bookshop, is a cassette of the Breeders, the same one that had been taken away from her. But also they have a little, it's not even a rebellion, they're just having a little moment of fun and they're not doing anything bad, but there's a little bit of, they get a bit bored with the radio station and so they change the station when there's a group of them in the kitchen cooking, I think, or cleaning up, and they put on a different radio station and it's 4 non-blondes.
What's up?
And they're doing the... They all start singing and Cameron's leading the singing and she's dancing and they just have this moment of expressive joy. And there is one of the characters is there because she loves singing and she loved singing gospel choirs, but she fell for one of the other girls in her choir and then felt she was evil and she seemed to have turned herself into this place because she's such a believer. And she starts to get into it as well, and they're all just singing with glee and dancing, and then of course they're caught on and it gets stopped and shut down. It's just worth noting that it's women rock stars that they're listening to, and it's a woman that is fronting the band that they even go to see. It's a very woman-led project, and it just feels nice to not only normalise how people feel and how people explore their sexuality as teenagers, but normalising it. Women do that sort of thing as well. Women are rock stars and pop stars. Women make films. The scene where Rick breaks down, for example, with Cameron in the one-to-one, she comforts him. He breaks down and she's the one that's together and composed and just wanting answers, and she comforts him because as a human to human, she feels for him. There's power in her. She has her own moment of breakdown as well when she calls her aunt and she's not supposed to. She hides under a desk and she phones her and she tells her that she wants to come home. She's not happy, and her aunt just says, I'm trying to do this to help you, I love you, and she's saying, well, I love you too, but I want to come home. And it's just deeply upsetting, and she just has that moment of breakdown where she starts to cry, and that was me gone as well. The tears were tripping me at that. I couldn't. At
the end of that shot where Cameron says goodbye Ruth, she's saying it formally, isn't she? She's saying I'm obviously not coming home.
It's very final.
Ever.
I'm never going to see you again. So goodbye.
It's you're not the way out of the situation. I have to do it myself. Like most teen movies, and I would definitely call this a teen movie.
Oh yeah.
Like most teen movies, its dominant message is
adults are
and your own coming of age will involve an effort on your part
really
as a
hard
result.
Things. You have to take it in your own hands. I think in a personal way that I find really upsetting, and I've got quite a few friends because I'm from Belfast. I'm from a very religious place. I've had a lot of gay friends who've been disowned or threatened with being disowned by their parents because they're gay or bisexual. I felt incredibly lucky because when I was a teenager and I was getting the got talks from my mum. My mum was amazing, and my mum very gently said to me, whatever happens, if you ever want to feel like you want to bring a girlfriend home, never be scared of that. I don't care. I won't bat an eyelid. I'll accept whatever happens. And obviously, at the time, I was like, Mommy, what are you? Stop it. Because I was 13, 14, and just any kind of conversation like that was excruciating to have. But 20 years on, I look back and I appreciate that so much, because so many of my friends still don't have that. I'm devastated for them about what that means, because I had a mum like that and I ended up not needing a mum like that, and I felt devastated that I had so many friends who didn't have parents like that.
If only you could have swapped your mum with someone else's mum.
And why would I give her away? Why would I give a mum that great away? I felt very grateful, and I think what's upsetting about that is that it shouldn't be that way. It should just be parents loving their kids no matter what, and doing what's best for the kids and not what's best for them. And then it's really difficult, because then you think, well, her aunt obviously feels like she is trying to do the right thing for her.
You could even argue that Lydia, the camp therapist, thinks that she's doing the right thing for these kids as well.
Yeah.
As long as you convince somebody that the alternative is worse, then you can get someone to do a really horrible thing to people out of the common solidarity, out of empathy.
I mean, I think again with Lydia, she's played by, I've never known exactly how to say her name, but it's Jennifer Ale or Jennifer Ellie. Every time I see her, I was like, I know her, and there's something a little bit Meryl Streep about her, but she's obviously not Meryl Streep because she's 20 years younger. And the accent was throwing me, because I don't think I've ever seen her doing anything where she's not English. She's very famous for Pride and Prejudice.
I was having so many problems going, well, no, you shouldn't be playing this role, because she was Lizzie Bennet in Pride and Prejudice.
This Year's Love, but she has this presence where she's stern and you feel like violence could erupt from her at any time, but it never does. Her violence is verbal. Her violence is tying up Adam's hair,
shaving it off.
And shaving it off.
Standing on Mark.
Very gently, standing on Mark's back. She just really holds her foot there. She doesn't actually stand on him. She doesn't drive her foot into his back. She just holds him there firmly.
She is, though, I think it's quite an important costume choice. She's wearing pointed heels.
Yeah.
Which is a little more painful to have pressed into your back than...
Yeah, but I think that's the point, is she's not really pressing, it's just set there. That's enough to give a message of control and to keep him there. And then when he starts to rise, she backs off. He pushes against her and she backs off, but then he crumples on the floor, and then she kneels down and she comforts him. She strokes his back and comforts him. There is this potential for violence, but it's internal. The violence that she's enacting on these kids is internal. They're internalizing this self-hatred, this self-loathing that she's giving them. It's very, very difficult to argue against when somebody's very well-meaning, but they actually are abusing someone.
Yeah.
I feel like I would struggle to have this kind of conversation with somebody who was a real believer. Like, I'd be interested actually to talk about it with, because I had a friend back in Belfast who's a lesbian. She's also very religious, and this was something she had a very hard time with. She managed to find a church that accepted her. This is somebody who'd gone through that journey, as well as the parents not really accepting her as she is and saying they would disown her and that she would burn in hell for eternity because of her choice that she'd made, and her not being able to explain that I haven't made a choice. If I could choose, I would not be this, because I hate it. I hate myself for this, but I cannot physically be with a man. And this was quite a few years ago when we had these conversations, but I'd be interested to know what somebody like her would feel about this film.
As a film about an event that was feasible in 1993, it might be seen to be saying, hey, look at what we used to do. This is still happening now.
Well, I think that's the point of making
widely
it.
in the States.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, why wasn't it set now? But Chloe Grace Moretz explained it was so that the kids wouldn't have mobile phones.
Yeah.
So that an isolation from the outside world would be feasible. She said it's a misinterpretation of the Bible that gets you to think that someone might be going to hell if they're gay. But there are two specific verses in Leviticus that says you should be put to death if you're a man. So your friend who's found a church that says it's okay to be gay has found a church that's okay with disregarding at least two verses in the Bible.
It's a very liberal city church.
There are flavours of Christianity who would look on a church like that and call that a dead church.
Oh, absolutely. They would regard them as heathens.
Yeah.
The churches I had to go to when I was a kid would not regard them as Christians.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be mean to them because I wasn't Presbyterian, I was Methodist. It wasn't a hellfire and brimstone type church that I went to. And then I went to Sunday school in a Happy Cathy Baptist church, so that was why I recognised a lot of the singing and Rick playing his guitar and his Christian rock.
Pastor Rick with his guitar and his no
he's
tie.
Being all cool.
He's down with the kids.
And casual, playing table tennis with them, having intimate chats about his journey.
You seem to have taken a bit of a shine to Pastor
I liked
Rick.
his moustache. I can't lie. It was a funky 80s throwback moustache that he had. So there's a lot going on in this film. I really recommend watching it. It's beautifully made. It's so well written, directed, filmed and edited and acted. I can't fault it.
There was one point where I thought this feels a bit slow, but that lasted about 3 seconds. I have no substantial criticisms of this film.
It packed a powerful punch for me emotionally. I think it really affected me, and I think it's really worth seeing. I think it's really important film to see. I'd be interested to know what people think, because it's said earlier that it's a queer film. I don't know who it's directed. I mean, I think it's for everybody, but I wonder if it's more for heterosexual people and for religious people, for them to see the effect that this stuff has on people not being able to live their lives. Anybody who's gay, if they're out, maybe if somebody isn't out yet, that might be helpful, or it might scare them. I don't know.
It is a way of going, there are social consequences because society has ideas about what you should and shouldn't do. Be aware that coming out is a matter of making knowledge public in a particular social environment, which may include people who don't want that knowledge to exist. And I do wonder, though, does this film that goes, the kids can escape, does this film misrepresent how serious gay conversion therapy is?
Well, that's why I wonder if it's a happy ending, but perhaps not. That's what that final shot said to me, is that they've got this freedom, but it feels temporary. They're on the road, but they're on the run.
It's certainly an insecure situation.
Maybe it's whatever the American dream can mean to you. I suppose it's the interpretation of that too. For a lot of people that can just mean freedom, and freedom can come at a price. Their dream is to get on the road, to get away, to be themselves. They have each other, they've found each other, they have their people, but for how long can that last, really? They are very young. There's just so many question marks hanging over it. So I think that's why the shot is prolonged. If it had have ended after a few seconds, or, actually it does something very interesting. It runs for the length of a song, and then the song ends, and it's just the song is non-diegetic, and then you're back to the diegetic ambient noise of the car and the countryside. That's when it feels like you get the discomfort. As an audience member, you get the discomfort because the music is going along, they're on the road, this is lovely, this is great, this is very happy now. And then the music stops, but the shot continues. This is actually getting a bit awkward now. And you feel antsy, and you feel like you needed to cut. I need to cut. It's not cutting. Why is it not cutting? This is really awkward. I'm still watching them, and now I feel really uncertain about where they're going. And actually I'm noticing that the car's moving forwards, but they're looking backwards. I don't know how to feel about this anymore. And then it goes to the credits.
It is an indirect way of saying they're moving into a situation of some jeopardy. But I think I might have said it more overtly. Because I have no sense of subtlety. If I ever make a film, they're going to be so in your face. They're going to be like James Cameron's films. Every message repeated 8 times.
Hooray for me. I liked it because I like subtlety, and I like being able to read subtlety. I suppose maybe then just a quick note on the title of the film, because this is something Chloe Grace Moretz mentioned in her interview, was the idea of miseducation and that idea of misreading or misinterpreting the Bible, and interpretation being then fed to people as then being miseducation, or this idea, I suppose it's very loose, this idea of, well, this is who you are and this is what comes naturally to you. You're clearly a wrong human being and we need to educate you. So her re-education is miseducation. There's quite a few ways we can go with that.
I think in spite of what Chloe Grace Moretz felt she had to say in saying that the miseducation refers to a misreading of the Bible.
And we can't be sure that she feels she has to say it or she actually means that, she actually thinks that.
She could feel both. She could feel she has to say it and also think it. She has a vast social pressure on her to say it. I think the film is implicitly saying that educating people using this particular book of Bronze Age folklore as your source of knowledge is failing to educate people. And you can make the thing you do look like educating them, but it remains miseducation. It's saying that in quite a few subtle ways. You may find no one at all on the crew and cast saying that overtly, because because you're not allowed to say that overtly
because
in the US these days.
you have to respect religious freedom, and if you're critical in any way of anything to do with religion, you're attacking it rather than just raising some issues around an idea.
Yeah.
So to be very clear, that's what we're doing. We're raising issues around ideas that we don't accept, and we have a right to do that too, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Do you have any other points? I think that's mostly all the things I really had to say.
We have covered this movie and we've done it inside 80 minutes.
Great.
Leaving us, according to this, over 73 hours of free space
On my
on your device. Yeah. One day we'll have a marathon. Just think of the editing.
To get involved and to keep up with what's happening, we are at AV Cultures on Twitter and Facebook. The website is audiovisualcultures.wordpress.com. Every episode is linked on the podcast page, and links to study skills videos are on the site as well. The email is audiovisualcultures@gmail.com. Please do consider making a small monthly pledge on patreon.com to help sustain, improve and widen access to the podcast and the other educational resources I make. Thanks for listening, sharing and supporting. Catch you next time.